Aaron, obviously the season came to a close a couple of weeks ago. Now that you've had time to reflect, what are your overall thoughts on how it went?
I suppose I'm definitely one for number crunching, and I was looking at the stats a couple of days ago in relation to, I suppose, the overall team stats, if you like. Played 30 games, 14 of them at home, 16 away, and we didn't win enough games at home. Obviously, we won 4 games at home, drawn 6 and lost 4. We won more games away from home, which was an unusual stat. I didn't realise that at the time. We drew 3 and we lost 8 away. And I think, you know, looking at the overall stats in terms of 9 wins, 9 draws and 12 defeats, the 12 defeats, of those 12 defeats, 7 of those were by 1 goal. So we, you know, looking at those stats, I suppose, from our point of view, is obviously we're trying to get more wins, particularly at home, and turn some of those draws into wins, which would obviously give us a better league position at the end of the season.
Obviously, I want to move you back a few months, almost a year in fact. You took over from Pat Fennan. Fennan obviously very highly regarded around these parts and indeed the league. Did you feel much pressure?
No, I'm Aaron Callaghan. I'm not Pat Fennan. Pat Fennan would have his own coaching philosophy and how he plays the game, and he's been a very successful manager, particularly at this level. Obviously, still doing well over in Scotland. I knew the limits of I suppose my managerial leadership qualities. I've been coaching teams for a long time now, and I've also, when I played, managed teams, skipper teams. So I knew I could do a job, but it was difficult circumstances that we were coming into, because obviously the financial side of things were well documented. From my perspective, I have a coaching philosophy and a playing philosophy that I wanted to try and impart on the team and the club. And in order to do that, you need to be given time. And to be fair to the supporters and the players, we got a bit of time off the supporters. They knew we were trying to bed young kids into this team, and obviously we paid them back, I think, by the end of the season.
Obviously, you mentioned there about the difficult financial circumstances. Was that obviously very frustrating for you during the year and before the season, obviously, or was it just something that it's part of the job, you knew what you were getting into almost? Well,
I did. I wouldn't have took the project if I didn't realise the financial implications that we would have had in terms of building a team. It was an exciting project, don't get me wrong. Really, wanted to put my teeth into this one. I felt I was ready, as I said, after having numerous positions as number 2 and coaching in most of the clubs across the country. I love working with young players, and I love trying to help young players develop. And I have a proven track record in doing that, and long may that continue.
Indeed. I wanted to move you back to the start of the season. It didn't start as you would have liked, obviously. Was that just a case of the fixture list being unkind, or what was it?
Well, it was probably a number of factors. One was probably that we're still bringing a squad together late in pre-season, so a lot of players would have missed pre-season. We were still trying to adapt into the playing philosophy that I had. I was trying to impart that knowledge onto the players. And also, they were tough fixtures, there's no doubt about that. I mean, we were playing the top 3 teams that had finished in those positions, top 4 teams, if you like, in those positions last year. But we acquitted ourselves very well in those games, and we had some really good performances in all those games, albeit beaten by the odd goal. After those performances, I knew that things would turn around because of the fact that we were putting in such good performances, and the lads acquitted themselves well in that period. As pre-season, as those first few games, I suppose, finished, the lads were getting more and more knowledgeable about the way that we were trying to play the game, and we stuck to our principles, which was the key thing, because sometimes you can go, you can change your philosophy at that stage, but we stuck to our principles, and it paid off in the end.
That first victory, and indeed that first goal, came on Good Friday against Cork City. How much of a relief was it for yourself and indeed the dressing room as a whole?
It was important. I mean, the first win in any league, in any season, is very important. The earlier you get it, to be fair, it settles the team down. It gives them great confidence in relation to what we're trying to, I suppose, preach, if you like, at the club. But that stat, if you like, in terms of the first goal, and albeit from Dinny as a striker, the stats from our goal scoring across the season have been poor. 63% of all our goals came from midfield, 27% came from the defenders, and 11% came from our strikers. So, you don't need to be a scientist to work out where we struggled basically this season.
And then obviously we picked up another victory straight away, and then the game against Monaghan was null and void in the end. What was your take on the whole Monaghan situation?
Well, it was a difficult game. I mean, we were trying to, some of the lads, I mean, Roddy obviously turned it into an occasion, coming back to the club, etc., etc. It was a very poor performance from our perspective, and probably our worst performance to date during that spell, and that included the games that we lost. But to be fair, we dusted ourselves down, we got back on the bike, and we put in some good performances, particularly after that game.
You mentioned the good performances after that game. There was a couple of defeats, a couple of victories. Then came the Shells match away from home. That was a pivotal win, wasn't it?
I think it was the turning point for us. Because when you're playing teams at this level and you can go away and you can be, I think Shells at that stage were riding high in the league, probably third or fourth in the league, and to go away in their own patch and particularly avenge, I suppose, the 2-0 defeat that they had imparted on us early on in the season was definitely a turning point for ourselves. I think the players really knew after that performance, that there was no team to fear in the league. Once we made sure that the preparation and the mentality was right of the players, it was good.
And then it rolled into June. There was the FAI Cup victory over Drumkeen, and then came that famous night here at Dalymount, the 4-0 win over Shamrock Rovers. What was key to that success, and how proud were you of that result and indeed the performance? Well,
I'm more proud for the supporters, I suppose, from my perspective. I don't look into too much history in terms of what results that had gone on before. But it was hugely important for the supporters. Up until last stage, we hadn't really given the supporters much to shout about. We were sort of, winning games, losing games, etc., etc. But I think that just gave them, a huge amount of pride in relation to the club, and also to, I suppose, bragging rights from their perspective. They've been on the wrong end of a few defeats over the last few years. So it was more so for the fans, but. From the players' perspective, I mean, when we came in after that game, the dressing room was absolutely hopping. And as I said to the players that night, I says, look, if you prepare right and you get your mentality right, and you go out and believe in yourself, which they did, we're a match for anyone.
Then came the European adventure, I suppose, for the 2012 season. The draw was a bit of an unknown, wasn't it?
The draw was unknown because obviously we didn't know much about Tor when we got drawn against them. Fortunately, we had played over in Iceland when I was coaching St. Pat's the year before, so I had an idea what to expect in relation to the personnel that they would put out on the park, and I knew it was going to be a difficult game from the off. But I also then was a little bit I was a little bit tentative in relation to the experience of these young lads not having played at that level. But I thought we acquitted ourselves well in the first leg, the 0-0 draw. I thought it was a fantastic result. We probably should have had a goal on the night that was disallowed. But we were confident going over for the second leg.
In the aftermath of the Tor defeat, was there a sense of you having to pick up the dressing room at all?
It was a little bit. I mean, we played UCD on the Sunday when we came back after that, and UCD are always a very difficult team to play against. And I spent 2 years at UCD, and the fitness levels of the club are second to none. The players, really played the game with a smile on their face, and it was a difficult game to come back to. But we got a great win. It was a huge psychologically it was an important win for the club and for the players, to come back and win that game 1-0 with a goal from Evan from a set piece. So that was the pleasing part of coming back from that bad defeat.
You mentioned Evan McMillan there. He was the top goal scorer in the end for the season. Did you know that Evan was going to score that many goals by putting him in those positions?
Well, I knew of his qualities in terms of the threat that he was from set pieces. We had at UCD tentatively put him up in 1 or 2 of the games. Martin would have put him up. I think we put him up for 2 games in our promotion season when we got promoted from the First Division. And I always felt that he can pass a ball. He's very technically gifted. He's good at starting our positional attacks, particularly from the back, and he's got a great first touch for a big lad, So I knew at some stage I would give him a go, and we had enough centre halves at the club, quality centre halves. With Dave Mulcahy being able to play there, and Owen being able to play there, and young Kevin Feely emerging into the talent that he showed this year. I always knew at some stage I was going to give him a go. But I think last year he got 5-6 goals for St. Pat's from a centre half position, and he probably missed about 11 or 12, which were easier than the ones he scored. So I always knew there was a goal in Evan, and it was good that he proved it this year.
Obviously, Aaron, August was a bit of a mixed bag of results. There was defeats against Derry and Drogheda, and then the draws against Bray and Shelbourne. That draw against Shelburne in particular, it really showed the fighting spirit of the team, the never say die attitude.
Yeah, we produced that a couple of times during the season, as I said, you know, on the brink of defeat. You know, UCD game springs to mind when you're 2-0 down in the 90th minute and coming back to draw 2-2. A late equaliser down in Cork prior to the European trips. And obviously that game against Shells, where on the night I didn't think we actually performed very good. I thought Shelburne were the better side on that night, and it was one of those games where you don't play well but you nick a result, and most managers will tell you, like, you know, when you get one of those, you take it.
Then a couple of weeks later was probably the most famous result of the season for Bohs in terms of the fans' perspective. The 1-0 win out in Tallaght, the first Bohs win out in Tallaght Stadium against Shamrock Rovers. How proud were you of the efforts of the players that night?
Well, I was proud of the efforts all season of the players, to be honest with you. I mean, and you know, they raised their game to a different level, particularly against obviously the two wins that we had against Rovers. But the away game against Rovers, I suppose the stadium's a fantastic stadium. There's no doubt about it. And the fact that we were trying to get a monkey off our back that we hadn't won over there was also doubly pleasing from our perspective. Like, but it was a valuable 3 points at that stage, because, you know, we were in that mid-table position. You know, and at the end of the day, the clubs. I think UCD started winning games, Dundalk had started winning games as well. So the 3 points was hugely important for me from that perspective, like, you know. And then after the game, you can worry about, you know, it's another game that the fans can go and enjoy. But it was a great victory, great performance on the night, and I think everybody played their part, fans, players, and coaching staff.
From the high of that win in Tallaght, then it came slightly crashing down a bit against Dundalk in that quarter-final of the FAI Cup. That must have been a particularly disappointing part of the season for you.
Yeah, that and Tor were the two most disappointing games from my perspective, and it just proves, you know, that you do get inconsistency with young players, like, you know what I mean. I mean, you don't have to raise a player up for a game against Shamrock Rovers away or home, and I think one or two of the players thought that we're just going to have to turn up to beat Dundalk, and obviously, you know, their attitude wasn't right on the night. It wasn't a great game. I don't think either team deserved to win the game, to be honest with you. It was a special free kick from a young player who's making inroads into the league, Mark Griffin, this year. And that was the difference between the teams on the night, just one special free kick. And that was disappointing, because I felt that if we could have got through that, you know, you go into a semi-final against whoever you get drawn against, and you know, anything can happen in a semi-final perspective. But they were two lows, and, you know, but overall, I mean, if you're having two lows in the season where you're putting 30 players together at the start of the year, like, you know, we've got to be hugely, I suppose, grateful and thank those players that put in a Trojan effort.
Following that exit then from the FAI Cup, there wasn't much to play for as such. It was a Santa Cup spot, but the players stuck to the task and they picked up another few valuable wins along the way.
Yeah, I think after that game we had too many draws, and that was the key. We needed to, as I said to you, turn some of those draws into wins, which would have cemented the Santa Cup spot. It was a huge objective of mine, particularly after that cup defeat, that we try and get that Santa Cup spot, and I felt that we could have. And even to the last game of the season, you know, we had to beat, obviously, Drogheda to try and attain that cup spot, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. Drogheda on the night in the last game were just too good for us. In the
immediate aftermath of that defeat to Drogheda, Owen Heary reflected that Bohs have maybe underachieved throughout the season. Would you go along with that word as such?
I thought we did underachieve. I mean, I thought we had definitely a possibility of making that Santa Cup spot, particularly in the last few games. So overall, I think Owen's right. You know, we had a lot of young players playing for the club. We know that, that's well documented. But we also had one or two experienced players that acquitted themselves hugely throughout the year. You know, Dave Mulcahy was fantastic for the young players. Derek Pender was fantastic. Evan, albeit he's only 23, 24, is still a very relatively young player at this level. It's probably only his third, fourth full season in this league. So those, and Owen himself, those experienced players really helped the club, or really helped those young players develop throughout the season. And I think Owen's right. You know, I think I was a little bit disappointed with the last result of the season, because I felt that we could have just nicked that spot.
Aaron, obviously you're not one to pick out individuals, as I've noticed throughout the year, but Kevin Feely and Evan McMillan were rewarded recently at the Player of the Year Awards. Would you go along with those two awards?
Yeah, I have to say the two lads were fantastic all year. And I suppose prior to the draw of the game, we had one of the best defensive records within the league. We obviously we shipped 4 goals against Drogheda, which was a little bit disappointing from my perspective. But it just goes to show you how well those two players defended throughout the year, and most, I suppose, they played in 85% of the games together. Kevin Amers is a fantastic young player. and Evan was brought to the club to do what I knew Evan could do in terms of his leadership qualities and also building positional attacks for us, particularly from the goalkeeper. But they were, I suppose, aided and abetted by some fantastic performances from Ryan McAvoy, from Luke Byrne when he came in and played maybe 14, 15 games. Michael Barker was fantastic. Owen was as steady as you're going to get, and Derek Pender played right back and left back a few times. Roberto Lopez came in and was fantastic. Young Andy Mulligan towards the end of the season started to get games. John O'Connor got games. Keith Buckley was a tireless worker in the middle of the park all season for us, So I think overall, I was delighted with the attitude and application of all the players that we signed this year.
I know you mentioned it towards the start of the interview, but the relationship between the fans and the players must have been very pleasing for you to observe.
Well, they're realists, aren't they? I mean, they've come off successful seasons where the club has won doubles in 2008, 2009, and has been at the forefront of Irish football for the last maybe 10, 15 years, where they've been challenging year in, year out for championships. And to take a hit like that in relation to the finances of the club is very difficult for any club to take, and any supporters. But you do have to look what's going on in Scotland in relation to the Rangers debacle, where they weren't running their business right. They got relegated, obviously, down to the bottom tier. But they're still getting 25, 30,000 supporters at each game, which is absolutely fantastic. We're just delighted that the supporters realise what we're trying to do, how we're trying to change the philosophy of the club in terms of making a passing game, and for them to come and enjoy the games and enjoy that experience of watching young kids develop and play.
Obviously now, Aaron, it's the close season. What do you see happening over the coming months and indeed looking ahead to next season?
Well, my job now is to start signing back the players that we want to keep at the club. Any of the players that performed well last year we're trying to keep with us for another year. I suppose it's indicative of the league when you look at sort of Sligo Rovers, who've just won the league, and most of their players now are out of contract. I mean, just reading the quotes that Mark Quigley had a couple of weeks ago in the paper that some of them are going on the dole, which is actually hard to believe. But it's a transfer merry-go-round at the moment now. Most managers at this level will be looking to see who they can bring in, and we're going to be no different. So the hard work for me starts now in terms of making sure that we can sign on those players that we want to keep, and then also looking at one or two recruitments that we can bring in.